All right, well, it's 1:30, so I think we're going to get started. Hello, my name is Scott Friend. I'm the president of the CFTA, and I would like to welcome everyone to this month's webinar series on the University of Washington's GIS Interior Space Mapping, a more in-depth look into GIS at UW Part 2 with speaker Aaron Chevrant. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Aaron, and we'll get started. I think everybody's excited to hear what you have to say in Part 2. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Scott. As Scott said, my name is Aaron Chevrant. I am a CAD GIS manager for the University of Washington. I'm in the capital projects office, so we do all of the capital projects on campus, buildings, and all that kind of fun stuff. One of my main roles right now is managing floor plans for the university, so all the space that we occupy and use. We try and keep a good floor plan of that, and we've been using GIS for probably about 10 years now for doing our space management system. So we did a homegrown space management system that's built in GIS, just because it really gave us a better way of looking at the information related to space than a traditional CAD sort of environment. So this is going to go into more details following up on part 1, which is a fairly high-level overview of some of the things that we do. This is really going to focus primarily on the CAD side. What are the daily processes? How do things work? What do our CAD people actually do to get the drawings ready for GIS? And then at the end, we'll actually get into some more GIS views of things and see how things can be used. So with that, I'm going to go over what we do for a base map. Our base map is also in CAD, not just the floor plans, and we have some interesting ways of dealing with our base map. Looking at how we do floor plans, it's fairly straightforward, but there's some interesting little things. One of the things that a lot of people are very interested in is how we do georeferencing. It's a little different, but I really like it. I think it's really cool, and it works out really well for us. From the GIS perspective, once we figured out how to get all the floor plans into GIS and maintain all of that infrastructure fairly easily, then it became an issue of, okay, well, we have this huge amount of stuff in GIS. How do we deal with it? And the main way we've come up with is using DataDriven Pages. It's a huge tool for us, allows us to actually be able to filter the data effectively without having to use complex definition queries and do some really crazy stuff. We also have another sort of unique view of our space in an isometric form for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of times when you need to look at a whole building, not just a single floor, and having georeferenced floor plans kind of causes some problems with that. And then we'll do a Q&A. And before I move on, I forgot about the Q&A. I believe we will do questions at the end. However, this is going to be a mostly live demo, so if you do have a question about what's going on, feel free to interrupt or raise your hand. I think there's a little raise your hand control. I think hopefully Scott and Jose will be able to watch for that and let me know if somebody's trying to butt in and I keep going. Other than that, I believe comments or questions will just go into the chat and we'll deal with those at the end. All right, so base map. What I did was I actually grabbed the Esri sample data for the campus editing template and came up with something a little bit different. So their view is primarily from GIS, of course. In order to work it in a CAD environment, I had to do some interesting things. What I did was I started out by creating a folder for the specific coordinate system. And there's a reason for this, and that's that all of the floor plans and site plans that go into a single coordinate system really benefit from being sort of grouped together. Also, we're looking at some other things down the road, being able to merge multiple coordinate systems into a world coordinate system database. And doing that really actually benefits from having things separated out. So that's how I decided to do it this way. So this is the California 5 NAT83 coordinate system, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. It's not my data. And so I actually, yes, go ahead.
Hey, I'm not sure if you're showing your screen correctly. Right now, I'm just seeing the
Okay,
control box for your screen. So,
the control box.
yeah, it's showing for the three different screens.
Well, that's weird. Let me stop sharing and try. Okay, can you see it now?
Now I'm seeing AutoCAD.
Okay, good. That's where we want to be. All right. So as I said, I created a folder that is for the specific coordinate system, and inside that folder, I then break up the floor plans and the site plans, and then each floor plan and site plan, well, each site plan has its own folder, but then each building has its own folder. So going into the Esri Redlands site plan, so what I had to do is I had to export the GIS data into CAD, so I actually had CAD data to work with. So it's a little backwards for what I normally do. So this is, and this is only a subset of the data. I just wanted to have something to work with. There's some nice clean polygons in here. There's some buildings. There's some streets, some vegetation areas. So with this, we have some custom utilities that we created that allow us to prepare the CAD environment for GIS. And we do that using ArcGIS for AutoCAD. So we're able to create feature classes inside of CAD and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So if I look at this site plan from an Arc catalog perspective, I'm hoping everyone can see Arc catalog. If you're not, let me know, please. Here is that same CAD drawing from a GIS perspective. You have your standard annotation, multi-patch, point, polygon, polyline feature classes. Not particularly useful when trying to deal with like real data. So what we do is we convert these into our own feature classes that have data and really the way we wanted to work. So the first step in that is to, let me bring it up real quick. I have a config file that is based entirely in Excel. And this config file allows me, I have to clean some of that out, allows me to basically define everything that I need to know about a CAD drawing and GIS that will make the transition very easy. In fact, for us, our translation process reads the same config file from the GIS processing side, and if the feature class doesn't exist, it'll actually automatically create it. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of, we have some CAD data and we have some GIS data, and we need to figure out how those two merge together. So from the config file perspective, the drawing name is just Redlands WG. I'm going to create a feature class called buildings. Feature class type, it's a polygon. Database name, I don't need to worry about that right now because I'm not going to do any GIS stuff. I do have the ability to do some analysis on flow networks and related tables and some other things. My block name, I actually don't remember that. I'm going to have to go find out. So here is my block name. Of course, I can't get my command window. There it is. There it is. So here is my block name, BLDID. So I'll put that in. And the layer that it's on, I just saw was building data. And my ID field is, I believe, BLDID. And it's looking for the tag. And so I'll put in BLD. And I don't really have any other fields. And what is the layer of the polygons that I actually want? And it's going to be the actual polygon boundaries, which is buildings. Put that in. Oops, caps lock. So before I do anything, I'm actually going to run my error checking command, which is just GIS check. Oh, close this first. This is one of the reasons why I'm trying to make this into XML. I'll copy that, close that, don't save it. So this currently doesn't have anything in that file. Oh, because I had that. Save that, close it. So from a config file, there's nothing in here, so it doesn't find anything. But if I add that line back in and save it, it will now, not only will it see that, it'll actually control the error checking that's done. So in this case, there's, so this one's actually saying that there's a duplicate unique identifier, and that there is an unlinked data block and an unlinked asset. And so there's a nifty little utility I wrote that will control our linking. And the linking is really just done with a field, so I can go and insert a field, and I can do this all manually if I want. It doesn't actually matter what I pick, because it just needs to know what that object is. And so I'll just do like color. So there's my thing. Of course, I have a utility that will do the same thing. It's just called asset link 1, and I pick the polyline, I pick the thing, and it does the same exact thing. So when I run my error checking now, it'll go through that feature class and identify that, oh, the only issue is that there's a duplicate identifier. Well, I actually don't want that. It's not an ID field. I just want it as some other field. So every time I run this command, it actually goes and reads that Excel file real time. So this time it says that everything's good to go. And I actually have the whole thing saved that I will save, and it'll do a whole bunch of other stuff. Now I've got about a half a dozen different feature classes in here. So now that I have those, if I look, I don't have ArcGIS for AutoCAD running, so I'll get that started up. And if I look at my feature classes, oh, I don't actually have any. So I have another custom command. It'll go through, it'll read the Excel file, and it'll actually go through and create the feature classes, transferring the data where appropriate. So like the buildings will actually transfer the building ID. So you can see down here in the properties, we have building W. If there were any problems, it would not really find a problem, because that doesn't do the error checking. So the error checking and the feature class creation are done separately, which is a little different than our floor plan system. So with that, I'll save the drawing, and we'll take a look in catalog and refresh that. And now we actually have our GIS stuff ready to go. And I'll take my word for it, it's there. So that is the primary way that we deal with site plans and base maps. I don't really have a way to show our translation process. We do have a tool that will create a version, attempt to load the new base map into the version, do some QA/QC if there's any errors or anything. It allows us to redo it and not do anything for real. But if everything looks good, we just reconcile and post the version, and then that site plan is up to date. I think that's probably about it for that. So with that, we will jump into the floor plans, which is very similar to start off with. You know, again, this is actually a CAD drawing that came from Esri. I did create some polylines for the rooms, and I changed the origin because it was a little weird. It didn't make a lot of sense. So let me just bring up the first floor here. And as you can see, there's the same, you know, no real feature classes. So we need to change that. So with the room numbers as just plain text, again, I have another fun command that I wrote that will actually convert text to our standardized room number block. And so it finds everything that's on that layer and all the text on that layer and converts that text into the room number attribute in our block. And I need to, there we go. So here's all the data that we actually track for a floor plan. We have the building, the floor, the unique floor ID, which is the building and floor combined together, the room number, the unique room ID, which is all three of those put together, building, floor, and room. And then we also do the square footage. You know, it's nice having the square footage in CAD because we actually use CAD for quite a few things, but keeping the square footage text updated is really not very feasible. So I have a command that will go through and attempt to link all the room numbers with all the polylines, and it'll create the square footage as an attribute, as a field, which also gives us our same link to the polyline. And from here, I can do my error checking and it found problems. It actually found quite a few problems. So there's a bunch of rooms. Oh, and I think it didn't pick up some of my room number blocks. There. Broke it. Well, so much for having good, clean sample data to work with. All worked out, and it worked great. And now, of course, it's not working. Did replace it. It just didn't. Oh, I know why. I had my object snap on, so it's snapping to bad things. So I will just do a manual linkage on those. The ones that didn't link, I can go through and manually link those together pretty easily. So there's a total, we still have a couple of unlinked. This is the kind of stuff that we actually do deal with on a daily basis. Okay. Got an extra link. So I know that I have some room numbers down here that aren't filled in, so I can actually copy one of my blocks. And I can renumber these. I'll just call that 445, 6, 7. Still having issues because I didn't relink them, so I need to relink them. You can see how the field is updated. It gets a little weird putting in the hash symbols, and that's because it needs to regen for it to actually work correctly or display correctly, but it does actually update it. So we're getting closer, and there's an unlinked, so room number 835. That one was incorrectly linked. Duplicate room number. Ah, okay. So this one does check for uniqueness of room numbers. And I see that 445 is actually used here, so I can actually use my renumbering utility, and I'll just I'll start with 46. And I'll just update 1. Should now have everything is good. So the error checking again doesn't actually do anything with the feature classes, but when I try to save the drawing, it actually does a lot more than just save. It interrupts the save command, does an error check. If there's errors, it'll actually present a hard fault. So if I try and save it again, it'll actually give me this error that'll be really clear to the user that they need to fix it before they go on. And save it again, everything's good. And I now have my 3 feature classes for my architectural, my GSF, and my rooms. And the architectural actually, it's nice because we can very easily select all the layers that we want. My utility actually does an exception. I have a couple of layers I don't want to show up, like I don't want my room boundary lines to be in that. A few other layers like my grids, I don't actually want those as part of the architectural line work. So we exclude those and just looks at all the layers in the CAD drawing, excluding those layers, and that creates a list of those layers that will be in the architectural line work. So with that there, we should now be able to see that in our catalog. And let's see if it'll actually show up. There we go. And if I identify, I can actually see that it does have data. You know, I've got a room number here. I've got my building number, my floor, my unique room ID, all that kind of fun stuff. It's a little weird with our naming convention and the Esri data set, but it kind of works. And that's primarily what's done for our floor plans. There really isn't anything else for the CAD person to do other than to the document management check-in, check-out. We use Autodesk Vault for our document management system for CAD files. Just a real nice integrated system. Allows us to just go in and pick a drawing, and if it's not checked out, you know, we can check it out. Do lifecycle control, so, you know, is it work in progress, is it released, all that kind of fun stuff. And this is one of our real floor plans, and you see it really is set up the same exact way as the sample data. Same feature classes, all that kind of stuff, and even, you know, here's all of the data that would be on that room. So that about covers the floor plans. It's pretty straightforward. It's built on having a field in our room number block that links to the polyline for that room, and through custom utilities, creating feature classes and transferring the data from the block to its associated polyline. so that we have all the data with the objects we need in GIS, so that when it comes time to do the translation, it's a very straightforward process. There's no complex spatial intersection with the room numbers where, room numbers don't fit inside the rooms, and it just, that sort of methodology has caused a lot of problems. This makes it real straightforward and easy to transfer data. And once you have the feature classes in CAD and with the base map or the floor plans, you can use a wide variety of processes to actually do the translation or get your data into whatever GIS you want. And you can do a manual process pretty easily. We like using a fully automated process because it saves a lot of time and it's a lot more consistent for us. So the next step, is to actually georeference the floor plan. Having this floor plan just sort of living in its own coordinate system isn't very helpful in a lot of ways, and so we actually need to do this in a georeferenced environment. Before I do that, I did want to show that we actually have another file that it's sort of a config file for the floor plans. It's much simpler. It's basically a registration of all the floor plans, and it's really important to kind of have this so that especially if you're writing code, that your code can know what drawings certain things should run against. So my base map code won't do anything unless there's something in that config file, because I do a lot of other CAD stuff as well, and I don't want my custom utilities to happen just sort of randomly on drawings, especially with our floor plans where I had to take over the save command and enforce a lot of things to happen on save. I only want those utilities to run if it's a valid floor plan. And so this valid floor plan allows me to control, which ones are valid. If we add a new building, it's pretty straightforward. Add in the drawing name and the feature classes that should be in there. The feature class list in here, the RMS, GSF, and BSE, that actually controls the error checking. So like here we have a roof drawing where there is no room and there is no GSF. And that's because it's just a roof plan. There's no usable space there. So I don't want my error checking to run for, is there a room polyline layer that's correct? Are there room numbers? Is there a one-to-one? I mean, there's a lot of error checking that's done on rooms, especially, that I don't need to run because it's a roof drawing. And so this allows me to control that. So for the other 3 floors, I won't do that because I think we're probably running low on time. I would need to add each of those drawings to that list, do the same process, and then everything is good to go. So moving on from there, we'll get into the world file. This is actually one of my favorites. So I've created a CAD file, and it doesn't have to be anything special. I mean, you can do this as a one-time thing. You don't have to save this at all. I just like to have a saved file that I can reference whenever I want to. There's nothing in here. I mean, there's really absolutely nothing in this file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to xref in my floor plan, or my site plan actually, first. And there's my site plan. And I just want that to be 0, 0. It's basically the site plan has a defined coordinate system already set. So it knows spatial location, and it's all correct. So I don't need to worry about that. So that's in the right place in the world for this coordinate system. And I'm going to bring in, let me actually open this up real quick. I have another specialized floor plan called an outline, which is really just, ideally I would use the actual building outline itself, or ideally a roof plan, structural roof plan that I can very easily reference the structure. So I have a complete tie between the floor plan and the roof plan and the building outline, and then use that same building outline in the site plan, and everything works out really well. But you can see here, if I xref in my site or my floor plan, it's really perfectly aligned. In fact, I think this is actually the GSF boundary that was created for that. So the building outline really represents the coordinate system of the building. And I found this to be a lot easier than using a real floor plan because, for one, it has a lot less stuff in it. I mean, it's just basically a polyline with a hatch. so I don't need to worry about all the complex objects loading in there, and especially when you start having, we have a campus with like 400 buildings on it, that XREFing in 400 additional floor plans with all their content, it can take a while to load up and get pretty complex. So for my outline, when I XREF that in, I want to scale that by 1/12 to get from feet to inches, or inches to feet actually. And I'm going to specify on screen and do the manual rotation. And because my origin is actually the corner of this building, I can pretty easily select my origin and my rotation. Sometimes if the building outlines don't have the same 0, 0 as the corner, then you have to insert it, move it, and rotate it as necessary. But you can see here it's lined up pretty darn well. There's a couple of little issues, and this is because the building outline and the floor plan outline aren't the exact same outline itself. So once that's done, I now have a representative floor plan that is in the site plan coordinate location for that building. So with a very simple utility, and I'm actually going to post this up to the Esri site and maybe a few others if I can think of them, we can create a world file from CAD. And what this is doing is it's asking me to pick the block that I want to create the world file for. And in this case, it's the floor plan itself. And where do I want it? Well, I actually want that to go into my floor plan folder. So here's the folder for that building. All the floor plans for that building are in that file. By naming this the esri_cad.wld, this will be the automatic world file that's used for all CAD files in that folder. If you only want this to do it for a single CAD file, you want to have it named the same thing as your CAD drawing, but .wld. So go ahead and save that. And once I have that, I'll actually bring open the campus editing template that Esri has, and we'll actually bring in that floor plan real quick. Another nifty utility is, once your floor plan is georeferenced, it's cool that it's in, a real geographic coordinate system. But once you're trying to look at a floor plan itself, this one isn't that bad. But if you have a building that's really strangely rotated, and like this one right here, you really can't maximize either the screen or paper utilization by having it rotated like 45 degrees. So we came up with a way to calculate the rotation necessary to undo that, essentially. And so what this does is it's a simple command that reads the world file and figures out what the rotation is to get it back to the CAD orientation. So go into my folder there and take my world file, and you can see here it's a very, very minor rotation. But I'll copy that and I'll save that. So here is the Esri site plan. They've got some floor plans in here already. They have their own way of doing the CAD to GIS translation, and it's one way. It's not my way, but it's a way. So I'm going to grab Arccatalog, and I have my 3 feature classes that I want, and I can just literally drag and drop those. And I want the rooms above, do some quick symbology, color, so I don't really have much data to do a thematic map on. And there is a perfectly georeferenced floor plan. Now, the fun part is there is a data frame rotation angle. So if you right-click up on your tools, there's a DataFrame Tools toolbar, and you can literally copy and paste the rotation angle that was calculated from CAD into the data frame, and that is a fairly perfectly rotated floor plan that matches the screen, not georeferenced. So This is real nice when it comes to buildings that are rotated, like this 45-degree building here. Those can be really problematic to deal with. One of the things that we've noticed is that showing people a georeferenced floor plan, when they're really starting to try and look at the floor plan itself, the first thing they do is kind of rotate their head to try and match the building itself. And we figured it'd be easier to, or it'd be better to rotate the map to the page rather than trying to have the user do that themselves. And that, I think, about covers georeferencing. I'm not sure if anybody had any questions on that yet, but that pretty much covers the CAD environment. And then I want to go in to do some other interesting GIS things. So let's go back to, so our data-driven pages. So with data-driven pages, at this point, I'm not sure I can even remember what data-driven pages was designed to do, because we use it exclusively for dealing with our floor plans. But essentially, it's a tool that allows you to break up a large map into grids to have multiple pages within sort of a map set. I believe that the data-driven pages is new for 10.0. There was something else before it in the 9 series. But it's definitely a useful tool for us. So for us, our data-driven pages system is built on a point feature class where each point represents a specific floor throughout the entire floor plan inventory. In order to create the necessary data we need, we actually have to combine 4 independent data sources into a spatial view that gives us all the data into one feature class, essentially, that has all the data we need for doing all the complex things that data-driven pages need. Each floor is the same exact point for a building. So if there's 10 floors in a building, all 10 points are exactly the same point. And we're working on doing some automated processes with this that would actually use a template point, and then for each floor, it would copy that point and rename the attributes with the correct building and floor. The rotation, we actually do store the rotation in the database for every building, and it is a building level value that we save versus a floor level, because we want all the floors of the building to be the same. So if we save it as a building attribute, then we can, as part of the view, have that be the same value for every floor, which is pretty nice. We have some really strange ways of dealing with our stacking order. We have a master index of floor codes that have a stacking order assigned, so that, you know, there's first floor is always above ground, but below second floor, and there's a first floor mezzanine between those, and there's a numeric value assigned to the level based on the stacking order that is really only useful for sorting or stacking purposes. It's not a number that would make sense to anyone for any reason whatsoever, and it's not supposed to. It's just a sorting value. Once we have that, then we can actually merge that with the building, so we have a sorting by building and by level, and we call that our fact level. We also bring in the building names from the official building name source. We are not the official source for building names. So as they update their data, it'll automatically update in the view, which is pretty helpful for when you're putting a title on prints. And then we do have floor names associated with the floor codes. So there's a short name and a long name for each floor. There's, you know, the 1ST floor, or, you know, first actually spelled out. So with all that, you know, it's a lot of data in one feature class that is just used for reference. There's no display for it. There's no other purpose to it other than to support data-driven pages. Let me actually just jump in and show you that real quick. And this has really been a huge leap forward for us in our ability to actually use GIS floor plans. We have a web environment which you have to build custom controls to control the building and floor, because you always have to filter the data in some way. Otherwise, you have all your floor plans stacked on top of each other, and it's a mess. So with the data-driven page control, I can actually page through each floor of a building, or each floor of each building if I want. And everything's in the right order, everything's consistent. Because it's the same point, it'll recenter on that point, and every floor is spatially in the same spot on the page, which is really nice. If you want to print out a sort of map book of a building, it's nice to have that consistency that, you know, all the floor plans are in the same location on the map itself. There's even dynamic text for the building name, the floor name, that as the data-driven page index is changed, it will update the text accordingly. So a lot of times, trying to deal with our entire inventory of, it's about, at last count, I think 1,566 floors, it actually takes the data-driven page system a little while to calculate that many and do all the things it needs to do. So a lot of times what we do is we actually go into our data-driven page index feature class and put a definition query on that. And the nice thing about that is it actually creates a filter of the entire system. So this one is limited down to just this particular building. And I can go through and just change that real quick to my building. And it won't do anything automatically. You have to actually refresh the data-driven pages. But because it's only having to deal with one building, it's pretty quick. If I look at the attribute table for this, you can see here's the point feature class that has all the data I need. You know, it has my rotation, my scale, my floor level, like 43, 45, and 98. I mean, that really doesn't do anything for anyone. But it's very useful when it comes time to do the sorting, so that they do actually sort. Looking at how that's actually set up, you know, you do need to make sure you pick the right feature class to do the data-driven pages on. And the name field is actually the floor ID. So this is the unique floor ID for every floor. For us, as we call it, fact floor, it's a combination of our facility number and our floor number. It is not the same as the sorting. You know, our sorting, because our floors have alpha characters in them and things like that, they don't sort well. They don't sort in the proper stacking order. So we had to create our stacking order system really to support the data-driven pages entirely. We do have our rotation field that comes in from our world files, so that everything's rotated real nice. We don't need to worry about the spatial reference or anything. And because our feature class is a point feature class, the map extent is fairly simple. We can either center and maintain current scale if we want to do a custom view of something, or we actually do store scales for 8.5 by 11 and 11 by 17. At least we're trying to get there. We're still need to do some updating. But it allows us to have different page layouts and have an appropriate scale for that page size, which is really helpful. Once the data-driven pages system is all set up, that's great, but what do you do from there? How do you actually filter the rest of it? In the definition query for the layers themselves that you want to show, it's not a definition query. It's actually, it'll enable this page definition button in the middle. And you do have to enable it, and and this is one thing that doesn't make any sense to me, is that by default, it'll set the show features that don't match. It has no understanding of why that works that way. So you do have to change it to match. It does need to match the floor ID. Your data does have to have the actual floor ID as well. So by creating the data in the architectural lines and the GSF and the rooms that has that unique floor ID, that gives us our field necessary for doing our filter as well. And that one should be fact floor. And that'll automatically filter. And it's just a matter of selecting which page you want. So this is the page name itself. This will be the floor ID. What's helpful is you could actually insert this, and I've done this before, inserting dynamic text, and I'll just grab some other attribute. I actually want to display that on my print. This comes in real handy when you're printing something out for someone to go out in the field, do some markups, identify some assets or something that need to be fixed or located. And let me a little bit bigger. This gives us sort of a page index that when we come back into GIS, that number right there, you can literally just type it in and it'll take you directly to that page. So if you had the entire inventory unfiltered, you would be able to go to any building, any floor, anywhere just by typing in the floor ID. And by having on the print, makes it really easy to do data input from a hard copy if necessary. So that is data-driven pages. Once that's there, anything that is building-based or interior space-based, as long as it has that same floor ID, you can do the same filtering. I mean, that could be literally anything you can think of. As long as it's associated with that floor, it'll filter and it'll show up correctly. And just to show the georeferencing component, I can turn off the rotation. And this is what the rotation of that building is in the real world with north up. Not very useful. And by just changing the page, it'll automatically re-rotate. Pretty handy. So that is the data-driven pages. Our isometric rooms is an interesting thing that actually Steve Grisey came up with for us when we were doing our translation. By creating georeferenced floor plans and not doing the whole building laid out in a grid like we used to, we kind of lost the ability to do whole building spatial analysis, visual spatial analysis of data. For some reason, I seem to have reversed the colors on these departments, but you get the idea. So our isometric rooms are actually 2D features that have been separated apart and skewed so that they look like they're 3D. The view on the right here is actually from Arcscene, which is true 3D. It's split apart with some space between them so you can actually see it. A little bit of extrusion. But one thing that I've noticed is that because it's true 3D, you have to deal with perspective and things don't always look quite right. Some floors are really easy to read down to the bottom, but then once you go up to the top, it's so close to horizontal with eye level that it's hard to see what's going on there. Whereas the isometric rooms really give us a consistent angle to view all of that from. The downside is that you really can't rotate around it because it's 2D objects and it's not real 3D. But I can bring that up real quick. And the nice thing is that this actually works in Arcmap, not Arcscene. We've had a lot of problems with Arcscene being kind of buggy and crashing, or if you change a definition query, things can blow up and like destroy your whole map pretty easily. So Arcmap is definitely a better tool for us for making maps, and the output is actually a lot cleaner. Not sure if you can really tell on this one, but the Arcscene tends to be real fuzzy and hard to see. So, and this works just like any other Polygon feature class, because that's really what it is. I can actually come in here and change my definition query to a different building. Too. That one's a little weird, and it should be rotated. We're actually still working on that. It's still kind of a beta program, but the hard part's kind of done of trying to figure out how to do the rotation. And the next step will be to use the rotation angle developed from the world file to rotate things first, and then do the isometric from that. So it'll actually be square to the page and then isometric, so it'll be a more consistent and look more correct view. With that, I think that's about all I have. So I would definitely want to leave lots of time for questions and answers. It's a lot of stuff, and unfortunately there's a lot of custom commands that I don't think would work very well for a lot of people. I'm working on trying to rewrite things to be more modular and config file driven, so that not just the base map where that's config file driven, but actually the custom code that builds the feature classes would all be config file driven, so that it could be more portable. But yeah, so any questions? I think we have, what, 10 minutes left?
Not seeing any so far in the chat window.
Okay. But I didn't put everyone to sleep.
Oh, we got a great job. I got it. I want to say thank you to you, Aaron. you did do a great job, and we really appreciate it at the CFTA. Real interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Yeah, it's fun being able to share this kind of stuff with other people. We've been doing this for a while now. We've had some challenges, and we've come up with some interesting solutions, and I think it's a good way of doing things, especially considering our rather severe lack of funding. The automation that we've been able to develop is really the only thing that allows us to keep going. So
I get the whole lack of funding thing.
I think a lot of people do.
I think we got a couple of people.
A couple of people are typing.
So don't everybody forget that the CFTA conference in San Antonio is coming up on August 6th through the 9th. So if you can make it, we've got a lot of great presentations. Matter of fact, I think one of them we put out on Facebook just a little while ago, the abstract from it. Okay. Eric or Mark asked, so how many staff members do you have working on this?
I currently have 2 temporary drafters that their time is expiring at the end of this month. Beyond that, it's just me. I do have one other person that is really focused on our capital projects and document review and CAD Standards Compliance. That really helps that we have good, clean, consistent CAD files from the projects to do the updates, but it's a full-time job just trying to review those documents because they come in virtually every day. There's a lot of them. So I think I need. I think the more important question is how many do I need? I would say that I probably need 2 full-time CAD drafters to do the floor plans.
So the ones you have right now are just temp students that you're using?
Yeah. The 2 temps we have aren't students. We do have a few students, quite a few students actually, doing a variety of things. But I don't think there's much being done on the floor plan side. They're mostly doing special project stuff. It's primarily just 2 drafters.
Jennifer asked the question that I was just going to ask. What's the amount of square footage you guys maintain?
I think at last count, we were in excess of 20 million square feet that we actually have in CAD. Like I said, I think it's last time I saw it was like 1,566 floors, but that fluctuates almost daily, honestly.
And
especially with our lease stuff that constantly gets added and removed.
And you're maintaining that with 2 drafters?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, I mean, all they have to do is update some walls, doors, windows, and polylines. I mean, and most of that is actually coming from a project file in the first place. So it's a lot of copy and pasting. It's strange that it's actually the smaller the project or change request is, the more difficult it is. We have our own alterations group that does non-capital work in facilities. So they can go in and put in a wall or take out a wall or do quite a bit for under $100,000. And those sorts of things, the research necessary to investigate those and make sure that things are correct is exponentially more difficult than the capital projects. Because the capital projects, there's a whole team of people that are doing designs, documentation, they do their own field as-builting. So when we get the final CAD drawings, they're pretty darn good and they're pretty easy to use. So it's all that little stuff that we actually spend a lot more time on.
Yeah, because we maintain with 8 drafters here, 22 million square feet, and I find a hard time keeping up with it.
Yeah, the key for us has been standardization and automation. Once we had good, clean standards, it automate everything we could, just absolutely everything.
That's great. So we got a couple more questions here. I keep moving as I'm reading them. Truman's comment, what materials? What kinds of training courses or courses needed if you wanted to become more familiar with database programming? That was Steve had asked that question.
Um, Unfortunately, it's an insane amount of stuff. Right now with CAD, I'm using AutoLisp, so there's, understanding Lisp code is interesting. It really requires a certain in-depth knowledge of AutoCAD, I think, as well. For GIS, we use a combination of Python and FME, but then on the database, we're also using SQL and understanding how to manage SQL views and relationships and indexes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a whole other science unto itself. And so my main job is actually kind of keeping track of everything everywhere and figuring out how everything goes together as more of a technology specialist. So I have a pretty good in the CAD side. I do all the CAD programming. Starting to learn more and more about the GIS side, but I tend to use an outside consultant for that. And database, we have our own database administrator, not a GIS database administrator though. So there's probably some more work we should be doing in the GIS side of SQL Server. And that's probably our biggest failing right now, is having that SQL Server GIS database administrator that can keep track of the database side of things and do things correctly. Because once you start getting into this kind of volume, efficiency and things start becoming an issue. And having things created and managed the right way, I think, is really important. And we're not entirely there yet.
Mark had a question. Do you publish the GIS floor plans for the upper admin to use or provide as a request?
Yeah, so the main purpose of our GIS floor plans has been to support the space inventory system that's on campus, which is done as part of our planning and budgeting department, which is on the provost side of the university, whereas I'm on the facility side of the university. So they'll read the GIS database directly and pull the floor plans, and they manage all the space data, all the stuff that goes into the rooms. They manage the database that has all of that information, and then they use the floor plans to merge the data with the graphic, and then serve that up and provide an interface for users to be able to go in and select a room and interactively update their space data. Excuse me.
Jennifer asked, did you say 8? Yes, I did say I had 8 students that basically we canvass. We've got about 22,800,000 square feet at Michigan State University, and we use 8 part-time students. They're full-time 3 months out of the year, and that's when we get most of our work done. We work on other projects too. Sometimes we fill in for some of our other architects, but yeah, I did say 8. You're welcome.
And so I am actually putting together the code for the world file creation and management. Let me see if I can find that real quick. So I think the only thing we're missing is the final on how to actually use it. So we're putting together some instructions on using the system, but it does have the Lisp code, free to use. It's not a lot of code. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, those are the 2 functions right there. Here's the create world file itself, and then calculating the world file rotation. There's also going to be a Python version of calculating the world file rotation, so you can actually go in through a toolbox and then select the world file, and it'll just print to the screen what the rotation is. We actually are using the Python tool in a more complex way to directly update our feature class that stores the rotations. So it'll actually read the folder that's containing the world file, which has our building number as the first 4 characters, and it'll use that to find the building in the database table and then update the rotation directly. And there are sample drawings, so the same drawings that I used today. There's a floor plan and a site plan already in there that can be used, as well as I think a world file recreated. But yeah, so once we get that finished up and get the instructions finished, we can load that up and make it available.
We have Susan typing something right now. Getting a lot of great jobs and thanks. All right, well, I think we're about the end. Did you have any more, Aaron?
Well, I could go on for days and days, but nothing specific.
Well, we can always have you back. I'm always interested in seeing what's going on at other universities, and what you're doing is some pretty cool stuff. I'd really like to know more about the automation because
Yep.
if I could cut mine down to, well, I don't want my students to hear this behind me, but if I could cut them down to half, that would be awesome. So,
Yeah. Also, another question about how is it feeding into the BIM workflow? We actually do have some buildings that are in Revit. Currently, the integration with BIM isn't particularly great. There's a lot of potential. I mean, there's a huge amount of potential, and I have some really interesting ideas on how to make things work. But a lot of it comes down to the technology interfaces, primarily, working with FME. They've been working on a direct Revit reader with their system, so you go into Revit directly. Currently, you have to export to, big run. You have to export it as an IFC, I believe, and then read it. And there's a lot of difficulties with that. A lot of it comes down to the modeling standards that are used, and strangely enough, the way it's exported. I haven't had a lot of luck with consistency that's been able to be very useful. So ultimately, my goal is to be able to read the Revit file directly, pull out the 2D and 3D representation as a GIS output, and integrate that into our process directly. Right now, we actually export the Revit file into 2D plan views, and then those just feed into our standardized CAD process. We have another set of custom code that will just automatically convert the Revit standard into our standard. It's not very different. There's just a couple of little oddities of the way they do things versus the way we do things. So ultimately, it's not that hard, but it is adding an extra step in the process for us, and I'd like to remove that if possible.
question, how do you share the space management file information? Through a web application? Is there an option for running space reports by the users?
Yeah, I should actually be able to bring up the space management system. Show that real quick. So they do have a variety of reports and things that can be done. This is all protected by our university security system, so the public can't get into it, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. So I should be able to come into, so here's my office, and this is a direct link into their database, so it's all their space data. And as the space administrator for my department, I can actually go in and change things if I need to. So I need to, split this room into half and share it with another department or something. I can do that. Suppose I could put in my employee ID, but yeah. So this is their interface. They also have some capabilities for being able to classify it by department, for example. Shouldn't be unknown. Interesting. Apparently, I need to go update things. And then I have my own. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so is this basically like a self-service module for anybody who's authorized to change the space data on your campus?
Oh yeah.
So
the department administrators are actually responsible for managing their own space data.
So you're pushing it out to the user community to collect that data.
Yeah. There are certain central requirements. Everything is controlled by the department code. So the security to be able to edit something is based off of what department is assigned to that space and what departments you have authorization to edit. So as a space administrator for my department, if a room is assigned to my department, I have access to edit that. Otherwise, I can only see it. So I can see anything, but I can only edit the things that are in my department authorization.
Jennifer had a question. Do you track every individual space?
Yeah. People. The people is actually kind of an optional thing. It's definitely not a forced sort of thing. Centrally, I don't think there's any requirement other than for indirect cost recovery. They have to have the principal investigator assigned to the space. But other than that, it's primarily as a tool for the departments that if they want to create an occupancy map sort of thing, then that's how they could do that. They can actually track that through there. But it's not really required.
Have you ever thought of working with your public safety department for that? For like emergency management purposes?
Yes. We've had a lot of discussions about a lot of things, and there's actually some resistance to linking up the employee directory to the space data, and especially the floor plans, and making that publicly available, or privately available, I guess, just because some people don't want everyone in the university to know where they sit. So security concerns and all kinds, I don't know. There's politics involved that I try and stay out of. It's an amazing tool that could be used in so many great ways, but a lot of times you have to get through the politics to do the fun stuff.
Well, I know we do some tracking of that way for like our university physician in case we have issues with like some type of illness, if it was like a meningitis, to see who may have been in contact with those different people at different times in different spaces. But yeah, we have the same kind of issue. It's a little touchy.
Yeah. We have been doing a fair amount of work with facilities on being able to track assets. And it actually has another component that we added into it for being able to do this using the Esri Attribute Assistant has just been an amazing capability. So let's bring this up real quick. So I actually, with this, I imported a bunch of assets based on the building and room number that was stored in the asset management system, and just created a point in the middle of the room. I can actually go in and edit the location of these. So by default, they're put in just in the middle of the room, but I can then actually move those to their correct location. And with the attribute system, it'll automatically update the building floor and room. So if I move it to another room, it'll put the correct room number on that, which I can then send back to the asset management system and say, hey, here's the new location of that. So there's a lot of things that we can do with this. And unfortunately, my headset is beeping at me because the battery is getting low, so hopefully I don't cut out at any moment. So I am actually going to be presenting at the Esri User Conference in a couple of weeks, and it'll be on more of the GIS side of tips and tricks for using GIS floor plans. Some of it is going to be the DataDriven Pages for sure, but also a lot of it will be with the Attribute Assistant and how those two work together to do some pretty interesting things. We did do one sample project where we imported in, through a variety of processes, a building that was done in Revit with all the assets and converted the assets into points, and the data got split out and put into the asset management system that deals with all the data, and the location was put into GIS, and then the data was merged back together. So now we have a way of managing the data through the CMS, and we have a way of managing the location with GIS and the GIS floor plans. And so there's a lot of really great potential with that. It's just a matter of kind of making it happen and getting that into everyone's daily practice. And of course, having the funding necessary to support the infrastructure for all this to keep working would be probably pretty helpful as well. So.
Jennifer might have had one more. It was a comment. Said we wanted to do tracking that way by the person in addition to the principal investigator, but we are going through how to get the people and the information without creating new procedures for the people. Do you guys have any issues with with that?
No, the space management system has been in place for almost 10 years now. So this is our standard procedure. So with the interface was redesigned about 3 years ago now, I think 2-3 years ago now. But functionally, it's essentially the same thing. Our previous system had the whole building laid out in a grid with all the floors, whereas this one's georeferenced, so it required some changes in the way things are done.
Very cool.
And there's also a whole set of reports and pure data, because we have some buildings where we don't have floor plans. So we have a way of going in and actually managing the data for those spaces that don't have a floor plan as well.
Very cool.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to call it because my headset's about to die. So.
All right. Well, I'd like to say.
But if anyone has any questions or anything, I'm more than happy to answer them. Send me an email. Got some contact information here. I wish I could join you guys this summer for CFTA. Unfortunately, I don't think I have funding to do it.
Well, there's always next year. So.
There is next year. Yep.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Aaron, for giving this presentation on University of Washington's interior space mapping, more in-depth look. So I'd just like to say thank you. And if everybody, I guess the time is up, so we will be posting the presentation material. Actually, it's already posted up there, so if you want to go up there and get it. And we will be also posting the presentation itself to YouTube as soon as we get the video process. So look for posting of it on our website, and look for next month's webinar. I don't have the title for that right now, but I will get posted.
Scott, the title is the subject will be in BIM next month.
Okay, great. So next month's webinar will be covering BIM. So everybody watch for the dates and the times and the link to the website. And once again, thank you, Aaron, and we will see you guys next month. Thank you.